You say you don't believe in God, yet scientist Sir Roger Penrose calculated the likelihood of the universe having this precise of a design, and the calculation he came up with was 10 billion to the 123rd power, which is the number 10 billion with 123 zeros at the end, a number that humans cannot even comprehend.
So this is assuming that with all the constants we know now, and the universe is popping into existence randomly, unconstrained by anything, what's the chance we get our universe as opposed to the others? It's that number. Um, the question is, if you have a God who exists, would that change the probability? No, because for each possible kind of universe, there's a possible God who could want that universe as opposed to this one. So there could be a universe or a God who only wants a universe full of puppies or black holes or hydrogen atoms and no life at all. And so for each possible way the universe could be, there's a possible God who could want the universe to be that way. And so this argument is assuming that the God he likes is the only possible kind of God, in which case his God would create this universe because the God he likes is the one that created him. But there's no evidence that his God exists as opposed to any of the other ones, like the God who only wants magic unicorns or puppies. And so the probability of his God existing, as opposed to all of those other ones, is at the very least the exact same as the probability that he just gave of that big number. Most likely lower, a lower probability. And I could just say the same thing about a law of physics. I could say there's this law of physics that we haven't discovered yet, that there's no evidence for, that's out there, that will just make our universe extremely high probability. It'll determine it, make it necessarily the case. Is there any evidence of that? Well, no, of course not. Just like there's no evidence of the God. And so this argument is begging the question by assuming his God is the true God with no evidence. And if his God exists, then his God would create this universe. But I could just say if another law of physics exists that determines all the other laws of physics, then it would also create our universe with a probability of 1. And so for this argument to work, you would need independent evidence God exists to have a reason to believe there is a kind of a God who would create this kind of a universe. And once you had that evidence, well, then you wouldn't need this argument in the first place because you'd have real evidence. But once you had that evidence, then you could infer that that God we already have evidence for could answer the fine tuning problem. Without any such evidence, you're just making shit up.
You say you don't believe in God, yet atheist scientist Stephen Hawking stated in his book, The Brief History of Time, that at the moment of the Big Bang, if the expansion rate of the universe was different by even 1/100,000th millionth of a percent, that the universe would have collapsed back on itself.
It's the exact same problem. Saying that God explains that is begging the question, assuming that there is a God who exists, who is the God that you like because he created you. But there's again no evidence for that. So again, for that argument to work, you would need independent evidence that such a God exists. And then again, you would no longer need this argument because you already had evidence. But once you have independent evidence that God exists, then you could use them as an explanation to explain the fine tuning problem. But again, the argument this guy's presenting is no different than me just saying, there's another law we haven't discovered yet. It explains everything we don't know yet. Do I need evidence for it? Nah.
You say you don't believe in God, yet your existence alone as a human was a 400 trillion to 1 odd.
Same problem. Even if you want to say that the improbability of you existing is explained by God, again, you need new evidence, a different piece of evidence that independently shows God exists. And then once we already know God exists and would do something like creating you, then you could use that independent knowledge God exists to explain the unknown phenomenon. Right now, there is no evidence of God. And so, just like there is no evidence for an undiscovered law of physics that explains everything, I could just easily say there's an undiscovered law of physics that explains everything, and it would be equally as explanatory as your made up God who explains everything. Simply saying, I have a magic sky daddy who's super powerful, can explain all the unknowns, isn't evidence of the sky daddy existing. It's called the God of the gaps fallacy. It's taking an unknown, making up an explanation to explain the unknown, and then saying, my unknown, or the unknown can be explained by my explanation, therefore that's evidence of the explanation. No, that's wrong. That's called hypothesis building. You built an idea in your head that you think explains the data. For it to be actually evidence, you need novel predictions to confirm that hypothesis, not just explaining things you don't know or find improbable.
You say you don't believe in God, yet did you know if one person's DNA was unraveled and placed end to end, it would stretch to Pluto and back?
I think this argument is saying that Because DNA is super complex and is really, really long, it requires a designer or something. Again, same problem as before, but no, it doesn't. Most DNA is junk. It doesn't actually work. This was proven by scientists. Most of it is benign, does very little, if anything, and it's caused by random chance and evolution, which is again proven by biology and chemistry. So definitely not design.
You say it takes too much faith to believe in God, and to that I'll ask you, have you ever seen non-intellectual produce intellectual?
That's a composition division fallacy. Yes, non-intellectual things produce intellectual things all the time. It's called a sperm and an egg cell. Um, all of your cells, none of them have any intelligence, but they produce you. Things that are non-intellectual do produce intellectual things all the time. That's the vast majority of literally all intellectual things are produced by non-intellectual things. Matter, electrons, biology, chemistry. Yes, non-intellectual things produce intellectual things all the time. And to imply that they couldn't is trying to argue that intellectual things are some kind of a fundamental essence of the universe. Because if intellectual things can't come from non-intellectual things, that means the only way intellectual things can exist is if intellectual things are some kind of pure essence of existence before everything else, which is stupid because pretty much everything we've ever seen is an emergent property. This kind of an argument is just ignoring the possibility that there are such a thing as emergent properties, which we know there are. It's been proven in science for hundreds of years. And so it's just a blatant denial of basic science to ignore the possibility that intelligence or intellectual things are an emergent property, like literally everything else we see.
Have you ever seen non-life produce life?
Same problem. Yes, non life does produce life. Guess what? Are protons alive? Are electrons alive? Neutrons? No. Do they build life living things? Yes. Yes, they do. Life does literally come from non life. And the consensus in every field of science is abiogenesis, that RNA or non living things can produce living things like DNA and cells and all of that. There is no other hypothesis. There is no other God or some other life created it. That's not even on the table because it has no evidence. The only hypothesis making novel predictions in the field is abiogenesis. They predicted that if life comes from non life, we would see corpuscles form on clay. We would see RNA becoming self reproducing molecules. We would make discoveries about certain kinds of other information related to the origin of life, and hundreds of these papers have been discovered. Hundreds of these predictions have been confirmed. No prediction has ever been made by the intelligent design movement in the field. So the only one that has evidence is life, yes, came from non-life. That's the entire consensus of every related academic field. And if you're denying that, you need to make novel predictions that support your hypothesis and publish them in papers, which you will not do because you can't.
Have you ever seen a massive explosion or expansion produce design and order?
What? What? The Big Bang didn't produce design and order. The Big Bang was a result of the physics, and the design and order, as you call it, was also a result of the physics. The Bang didn't actually do any of the designing. That's a stupid argument.
Explosion I've ever seen has led to mass destruction, not design and order. You say you can't trust biblical texts because they are ancient manuscripts that were written by men thousands of years ago.
That's not the reason we can't trust them. The reason we can't trust them is because they include miracles, magic, mythical creatures, the paranormal, supernatural, or UFOs. Testimony is perfectly fine as a form of evidence for things that have an empirical basis. If you said, I saw a dog, I'd believe you. If you said, I saw a unicorn, I'd say you're having a delusion. The same thing applies to testimony thousands of years ago. If they say they saw a dog, you can believe them. If they say they saw a unicorn, they're having a delusion. So texts from the past are treated the exact same as testimony from right now. Your testimony is evidence for things that have an empirical basis, like dogs. It is never evidence for things that lack an empirical basis, like unicorns, miracles, magic, mythical creatures, paranormal, supernatural, UFOs.
Yet the Bible is the most preserved text in all of humanity, with over 25,000 manuscripts in the world. I then ask you,
The level of preservedness is just irrelevant. I don't care how well it's been preserved. If I could get literally an eyewitness testimony of you literally just saying, I saw a unicorn, that would be more well preserved than the Bible because it's like literally direct first person testimony. You're telling me you saw a unicorn, but it's still bullshit. The level of preservedness is irrelevant. Eyewitness testimony is still bullshit if it's a unicorn because it's a delusion.
Why do you trust the reliability of people like Caesar, Galileo, and many other ancient figures when they have far more less items written about them?
Because they only said they saw a dog. They don't say they saw a unicorn. There are certain historians like Plutonius and Pliny the Younger, Pliny the Elder. They mention miraculous things in their texts, like Romulus and Remus being raided by wolves to found Rome. We don't believe that either. We think that's bullshit. There are many things they did say which we think are reasonable, like the mundane claims, like there is Rome. Rome is a city. Like, yes, that is correct. Just like in the Bible, there are many cities in the Bible that actually existed. There are many kings in the Bible who actually existed. But that doesn't mean we trust the bullshit. We reject the bullshit in both other historical documents and the Bible, because testimony, whether it's historical or eyewitness, is only rational to believe if it's of things that have an empirical basis. Things that don't, miracles, magic, mythical creatures, the paranormal, supernatural, UFOs, are not reasonable to believe based on testimony, regardless of whether it was done now or thousands of years ago.
You say that the Bible has been mistranslated and altered, yet the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 1950s have proven that claim to be false.
Go bother Bart Ehrman. It's just there's so many errors in the Bible. It has been changed many times. Literally, there are additions, like the part where Jesus knelt down in the sand and writes, "He who is without sin cast the first stone." That was literally an addition later by monks that was not written by any of the apostles or Jesus. Apostles and Jesus literally didn't write anything. It was unknown authors who copied down stories from 50 to 60 years after the events. Yes, they've been copied and shit. Like, who cares?
You say you don't believe in the miracles of Jesus, yet you believe in the miracles of the universe being almost perfect in every aspect for us and our ecosystem to survive.
That's literally the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, stick your head underwater for 5 minutes. Tell me how perfect the universe is. 99% of the universe is uninhabitable for life. This is a stupid argument. This is a very stupid argument. Like, maybe if every part of the universe you could live in and you could never die or be killed by anything, like my model of the best possible worlds. If the universe looked like my model of the best possible worlds, where it's impossible to force anything to do anything they don't consent to doing, including the universe couldn't force you to do things you don't consent to doing, then this would be a decent argument. This would be a solid argument that, like, if we lived in a universe where nothing and no one could ever force you to do anything you don't consent to, you get your own universe, you can design it however you want, and you could never be coerced or lied to be entered into some kind of a contract. If the universe looked like that, my best of all possible worlds, then yeah, this would be a good argument. It doesn't. The universe is awful. It is not designed for us. The universe kills us at every chance it can get. This is a very dumb argument.
You say it takes too much faith to believe in religion, yet I counter that claim with the notion that I believe it takes way more faith to be an atheist than a theist.
An atheist, just essentially the only requirement is no God. So I assume he means naturalist or something, that all there is the natural universe. That requires no faith because we have evidence natural stuff exists. Here, I'll show you one. This is a cough drop because I'm sick. This cough drop is a natural thing. It exists. Do I have faith natural things exist? No, because I've evidenced natural things exist. Now, if I believe a supernatural thing exists, which there's no evidence for, that would require faith. And so if you're a naturalist and all you believe is natural things exist, that's not a faith-based position, that's an evidence-based position. It's induction. If you believe another kind of thing exists that we don't have evidence for, that's faith.
You say there is no point to be a believer, yet studies show religious people live a happier life, more likely to adopt, more likely to volunteer, and marriages that are done biblically divorce way less.
I mean, sure, there's a point to be a believer. Like, there's a point to do marijuana. Sure, it makes people happy. Good job. I wouldn't contest that. Good job. If it makes you happy to be a believer, be a believer as long as it doesn't interfere with other people's lives. I got no problem with that.
You say you don't need God to have good morals, and you would be correct. But then you cannot ground your morality in anything else but pure opinion.
No, I'm a moral realist. I ground it in reality, like most philosophers. Most philosophers are atheists. It's like from the Phil Surveys paper, like 72% of academic philosophers are atheists, and 65% of academic philosophers are moral realists. That means they believe in objective morality, most without a God. You don't need a God to ground morality. This is just a silly claim theists claim because they don't understand how you could ground morality without a God. If morality is grounded in a being, a sky daddy, then it's by definition subjective. It is determined by the subject of the God. If it's objective, for it to be objective, it has to be independent of any opinions of any individual, including God. Like if it was a law of physics, it would be objective. If it was a platonic object, it would be objective. If it was an a priori abstract, it would be objective. There are lots of ways to make it objective. God isn't even one of them. And the fact that you don't know that just shows your lack of education and lack of searching into alternatives, not that there's actually a problem with the atheist position.
And you say, who cares? And then I'd ask you, who was right morally, Mother Teresa or people who have killed millions in the past? Because it all comes down to subjective opinion if you're an atheist.
No, it doesn't. I just answered that. It does not.
And if you've had enough bad people have a bad subjective opinion, we would be in a world of trouble. God allows us to ground our morality in an objective manner instead of
Objective means true, independent of opinions, feelings, or subjects. God is a subject. You can't ground objective morality. Sorry, bro.
pure opinion of one person versus the next.
Like the opinion of a god?
You say the Bible isn't reliable, yet carbon dating has allowed us to see over 2,000 prophecies confirmed from the Old Testament to the New Testament.
Absolutely none of the prophecies have been confirmed. They're all vague and ambiguous and garbage. And carbon dating has not shown any prophecies to be correct. Like I don't know what he's talking about here. It's like there's some prophecy that you can use carbon dating on. Like what does that even mean? That doesn't even make sense. Is there some prophecy about a timestamp that we can use carbon dating to confirm? Because I must have missed that one in between the three horns analogy and the temple's gonna fall analogy. I don't know how exactly we're supposed to carbon date and test any of the garbage ambiguous prophecies in the Bible, but that's not a thing I've heard of.
You say believers are living in a fairy tale, yet the evidence of Christianity is so overwhelming. I would ask you, how can you not believe?
Where is it? Where is this overwhelming evidence? Because it's not in the field of biology, it's not in the field of chemistry, it's not in the field of archaeology, not in the field of physics. No academic field has any evidence. The only ones who claim to have evidence are the theistic philosophers in the Christian schools. So this overwhelming evidence seems to have underwhelmingly performed in any of the academic fields where evidence is a thing.
You say, why does God allow humans to suffer and not even have enough food to live? And I'll turn that question right around against humanity and ask, why do we as humans allow people to not get enough food and water to survive?
That's easy. We don't have all power. If we were infinitely powerful and I could just snap my fingers and produce infinite food, I would do it. Poof, there you go. World hunger solved. If I could snap my fingers as an all-powerful being and create a morally perfect world, which would be the best of all possible worlds model that I've advocated for and that I created, I would do it. Then there would be no hunger. There would be no sadness and strife. It would be impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. Everyone would get their own universe that they can design however they want. And that would be it. That would be the solution. So I would be better than your God, because if I was all powerful, I would solve these problems.
You say, why doesn't God just come down and show himself and so that we can believe? And I say to that, he already did, and we killed him.
It's a stupid argument. Like, so the all-powerful being came down to earth and the tiny humans killed him. You don't see a problem with this. You don't see, like, maybe the all-powerful being who's a creator of the universe could have done something to stop them. Maybe. Instead, he was just crucified like the other 20,000 crucifixions that happened every few years by the Romans. Maybe not the creator of the universe.
And I know that if he came again, we would try to kill him again because the world hates the truth and loves their sin.
The world hates the truth, like, science. Like, well, no, there's no scientific progress for the truth. What? No, we hate the truth. Totally. Irony coming from a Christian, by the way. Like, of all the ideologies that are the most backwards and scientifically illiterate, religious is at the top.
Get right with God now. Time is running.